千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. And now, without further ado, we will begin our discussion of Tao Te Ching 19. And as usual, we will begin with a look at its title. Chapter 19, Return to Simplicity. As always, we have 3 characters in the chapter title. The first character, the one to the left, it means return. Going back to the source, the point of origin. The second character, the one in the middle, is pu, the plain piece of wood that has not been cut or carved. It is used in the Tao as the symbol for simplicity. Please note, there is also an alternative title for this chapter, and it translates as plain and simple. For this chapter, the overall primary theme is the return to plainness and simplicity. In order to express this concept, Lao Tzu compares and contrasts the way most people think, the conventional paradigm, and how the same things look quite different from the Tao perspective. Therefore, this is one of the best chapters for learning how to think outside the box, like a Tao sage, how to break out of the conventional paradigm to transcend the ordinary. I also want to make sure everyone is aware that this chapter is the third part 3 of a continuing thought from Lao Tzu that began in Tao Te Ching 17. In that chapter, 17, Lao Tzu talks about the highest level of the Tao in terms of rulers. In the highest level, the ruler's actions were so smooth and seamless because they were aligned with the nature of Tao. Lao Tzu explained the levels below that, or what would happen with the ruler if one did not have the Tao. So when the Tao is powerfully present versus when the Tao is present but neglected. In chapter 18, it went into more details. It focused more on the world in general instead of the ruler. The basic idea, the basic comparison and contrast is the same. That is, comparing the world where the Tao was present versus the world or the Tao has faded. Without the Tao, human beings must emphasize virtues. And the reason is because they no longer came naturally. The virtues were no longer so naturally flowing, and therefore frequent reminders become necessary. Another effect of the world without an emphasis on the Tao, without attention paid to the Tao, is the widespread chaos. And this will be in the form of deceptions, confusion, disharmony. They would all manifest in the world. And, of course, as you and I read these words, we would probably all note that this is exactly what we are seeing all around us today. So following this chain of thought, from 17 to 18, in this chapter, 19, Lao Tzu talks about the only way for us to regain the Tao. This path to return to the Tao begins with simplicity and plainness. Let's take a look at the chapter itself. 道德经 19. And sagacity, abandon knowledge. The people benefit 100 times. And benevolence, abandon righteousness. The people return to piety and kind affection. And cunning, discard profit. Bandits and thieves no longer exist. These three things are superficial and insufficient. Thus, this teaching has its place. Show plainness, hold simplicity, reduce selfishness, decrease desires. So the chapter appears to be very brief and concise, but as usual, behind these characters, these words from Lao Tzu, there is a world of meaning for us to explore. We will start that exploration, as usual, with a look at how the sections are divided. So looking at this chapter now, focusing on the Chinese characters, I think it is easy to see, even if someone doesn't know Chinese, that the first character of the first line is repeated again as the first character of the third line and then the fifth line. So let me highlight those for you so they're easier to see. So right off the bat, we can see the iterating characters. That character means to stop, to cease, to terminate, to end something. So it is translated the same way. As you can see on the right side, the English translation. Now that is not the only recurring character for those three lines, 1, 3, and 5. If you look a little further, you can note that the second character does not repeat, but the third character, it is the same for all three lines. So let me highlight those to make them easier to see. That character means to abandon, to discard, to relinquish, to let go. So they're translated in similar ways, as you can see in the slide. This makes it easier for us to see the poetic structure, the repetition. And what Lao Tzu is saying is that if we're able to put a stop to certain behaviors and attitudes, then we can get ourselves closer to the Tao, to reap the benefits. And the way he describes it is that the people benefit 100 times, which of course just means many times. Now, the first two parts are about benefits to the people, and that is the reason why line 2 and line 4 start with the same character, and they're translated simply as people. Let me go ahead and mark out part 1 and part 2. Then, the third part, which is lines 5 and 6, that is about the benefit to society in terms of decrease in crime. And here is the dividing line to show that more clearly. Overall, looking at this right now, I think it's pretty apparent. We can see the repeating AB, AB, AB poetic structure. When we look further down, below line 6, we don't see any more iterating characters. That poetic structure does not continue beyond line 6. Therefore, we can identify the bottom lines from 7 to 10 as the last section. It is section 4, the conclusion. And there we have it, the sectional analysis for 道德经 19. Now, we can start our line-by-line analysis and discussion of this chapter, starting with the first line. The first line says, and sagacity, abandon knowledge. This has been the cause of much puzzlement for students of the Tao Te Ching in generations. We can decrypt the mystery first by starting with the character, 绝. That is the first character. The meaning is to cut off, to terminate, to stop. And then we also need to look at the second character, 圣. This is from 圣人. 圣人, first character meaning divine, second character meaning person, together meaning someone who has divine wisdom. In other words, a sage. We put all this together to cut off, to terminate, to stop the sage. Is that what it says? At the surface level, this seems to mean ending the sage's divine wisdom. Is that what Lao Tzu actually means? Well, it turns out there is a lot more than just the surface meaning of the characters would suggest. Sen, the second character, in this case, is not quite what it seems. This is because this is a continuing thought from previous chapters. So the key to realize what this chapter actually means is to realize it continues the thought process from 17 and 18. What we have learned from that will be the following. When the Tao is present, we have true wisdom naturally. Naturally, because it flows from the Tao. When the Tao has faded, we have contrived wisdom. We no longer have the wisdom of the Tao that flowed naturally. In its place, we have contrived wisdom because the world is in a chaotic state. Therefore, we will see those who claim to be wise and claim to have the answers we need. The Sen, in this context, is the superficial pretension of sagacity. That means what these people offer is not the divine wisdom of the sages, but they offer the artificial version of that wisdom which has emerged in the world when the Tao has faded. That is what Lao Tzu says we should end, the false projection of wisdom. This is the first layer of meaning. Let us explore further. In the second part of this line, we have the two characters that translate to abandon knowledge. So we begin the analysis of those two characters by noting that the contrived appearance of knowledge, just like contrived wisdom, can also be harmful to us. And due to the inauthentic nature of contrivance, the contrived appearance of knowledge can be harmful because it is a projected image. It's an illusion, a facade that is lacking in substance. This kind of knowledge, not the genuine knowledge that is sourced in the Tao, it can lead to what we call the traps of knowledge. For instance, someone who projects that appearance of having a lot of knowledge can be missing important details, but is unaware of those details. This often happens to people who have not used a systematic approach in learning. And what that means is that invariably there are gaps in what they know. And they don't know what they don't know. So as a translator of the original text from ancient classical Chinese, it was important for me personally to have a systematic approach in learning that. By having this overall grasp of ancient Chinese, it is not an issue for me to understand what the original is actually saying. I work with those original characters the same way that you would work with a passage in English. And I know that the people who try to tackle it on their own, perhaps with the help of a Chinese English dictionary, they're definitely going to experience the gaps of knowledge that I am talking about here. And they don't know what they don't know. Another trap of knowledge is this one. fixating on minutia while losing sight of the big picture. This is actually the opposite of the above. The above is missing important details. This one is an overzealous fixation on the details. This is also quite frequent. A student or teacher of the Tao may be fixated on minutia like academic quotes from obscure classics, while losing sight of the real lessons. If one were to delve deeply into the body of knowledge in researching the meaning of Tao Te Ching, it is a guarantee that you will come across such papers. Papers that are full of notations and quotations. But as you wade through all of the above, you will definitely start to wonder, so what do these lines actually mean? And how do they apply to me and my life? Lao Tzu himself would argue that the latter, the meaning, the application, would be far more important than the details and the minutia. Another problem in terms of the traps of knowledge, common to the first and second sub-bullets that you see here, is the problem of arrogance. One can easily become arrogant by having certain knowledge and feeling that, well, I know things that other people don't. Therefore, I am above them. They are below me. How can we detect this kind of arrogance? Well, in our world, we sometimes see hyped up intellectual prodigies. They push that image, the image of the prodigy, by speaking rapidly and aggressively. If you actually slow down and listen to what they're saying, oftentimes you may find this person will pretend to be fair and balanced, but then is using false equivalence to obscure an unequal reality. What I mean by false equivalence is saying things like, well, both sides are at fault, obscuring the reality that one side is far more responsible for a problem than the other side. So that's just one example of how knowledge can be misused. There are other examples that we can see throughout history. Perhaps nothing is more obvious than the example of weaponry. Throughout history, especially in times of warfare and strife, human intelligence and knowledge have often been exploited to create weapons of devastating power. Of course, the end result may be the advancing of military objectives on behalf of one side of the conflict. But at what cost? We know what the cost of warfare is. The cost of tremendous destruction, human misery and suffering. So, from that simple example, we can see quite easily that knowledge isn't always a positive or a plus for humanity. It is a tool like any other, and therefore it can be misused. So when we are able to discard, abandon this kind of knowledge that is harmful to us, and the pretentious kind of sagacity, the wisdom that's only a projection, then we get to the next line. Line 2, the people benefit 100 times. So for this line, I would like to analyze the characters, break them down. 民利百倍. 4 characters, all simple characters still commonly used in modern Mandarin and still retaining the meaning, the same meaning as they had in ancient times. The first character means people as in plural. It can be person or persons. Second character, li, means benefit. Third character, bai, means 100. And then the final character, bei, times, like 100 times. So here, when I say 100 times, I just mean many times. So this is just like English. If you look at the translation, I translate 百倍 to 100 times. We often say things like, look, I told you 100 times. When we say that, we actually mean, I told you many times, not literally 100 times. It's translated that way because of the match with the existing expression. This is also, this kind of consideration is also why when I translate 1 wu, where 1 is 10,000, wu will be things, like living things. I don't translate literally as 10,000 things. Some translators do. I translate instead as myriad things, because we don't have matching English expression in common usage. We may hear 100 times. Sometimes we hear 1,000 times. Hey, I told you 1,000 times. Sometimes people will even say, look, I told you 1,000,000 times. We all mean the same thing. I've told you numerous times. But nobody says, look, I told you 10,000 times. That expression would sound perfectly normal in Mandarin, but it would sound odd in English. So now you see the reasoning behind what may seem like a simple translation. Back to Lao Tzu. So the contrived appearance of wisdom and intelligence is deceptive. It's tricking people into thinking that there's wisdom and knowledge when there is not. Therefore, stopping such contrivance is what brings benefits to everyone. Ending the false image of sagacious wisdom and knowledge is the first layer of meaning, as I mentioned. What is the second layer of meaning? It is about taking responsibility and developing self-sufficiency. This is an equally important concept in Tao philosophy. So, how is it that I can read all of that into this simple line? Taking responsibility, developing self-sufficiency. Well, we can see the concept much more clearly in the next slide. In this slide, what I have done here is that I have lined up 17, 18, and 19 as the rows of this table. If we go from the top down, we will see the thought process of Lao Tzu and how it flows through the 3 connected chapters. What Lao Tzu has in mind is one overarching concept expressed in 3 parts. And in the columns, I have the conventional thinking on the left, the Tao perspective on the right. And that comparison and contrast is what the 3 characters are about. Although it may not be apparent at first. So let me take you through how that works, starting with 17. In the conventional thinking column, remember the chapter was about the 4 levels of ruler, from the highest to the lowest. In the second level of the hierarchy, the popular ruler has done good things for us, the people. So we all like and praise the ruler. In conventional thinking, this is the highest level. The Tao paradigm goes beyond that and elevates it to the level of the Tao, which looks different. And it is not the best to have this popular ruler who has done good things. Why not? Because this, by nature, is not lasting. Rulers come and go. So this goodness will last as long as the good ruler is ruling. It will last as long as the good ruler's nature does not change, that he or she remains good. One can never be certain how things will change in the world. Suppose the ruler passes away. Suppose the ruler is overthrown. Suppose the ruler hands the throne to a successor. The next king, will the next king be as good as the previous king? Nobody can say for sure. If this is not lasting, then it is not the Tao. It is not aligned or congruent with the Tao. What can be more lasting than that? Well, what does Lao Tzu identify as the highest level of rulers? Here's the Tao perspective. The wise ruler has planned, prepared, and provided guidance, so people feel they did it themselves. The work of the wise ruler at the highest level is done behind the scenes. It's unnoticed by many. In 17, the way that Lao Tzu describes it is that the people all say, we did it ourselves naturally. And it will be the public works that in the left-hand column, people expect the ruler or the government to do for them. In the right-hand side, when people need something done, and you can think about maybe paving the road, building a bridge, maybe dig a well, building a water wheel, things that benefit the community. When they want something done, they are directed to imagine like a government warehouse where they can find instructions, material, and tools. So they have the means to help themselves. So in this scenario, with this approach, motivating the people to take action, this will last as long as people are around. When they are done building it, they take ownership and pride in what they have built. They know how to maintain it because they built it themselves. They pass the knowledge on to the next generation. This lasting nature makes what we're talking about here much closer to the Tao. So it is no surprise that Lao Tzu would say, such a ruler that knows how to do that is the highest ruler. People don't even know what the ruler has done for them. They feel they have done it themselves. In this way, they can enjoy the benefit of what they have created. They don't need to depend on the ruler or the government. So I think that makes a lot of sense. The same thinking continues on into the previous chapter, 18. In that chapter, we talk about what happens when the Tao has faded in the world. So the conventional thinking in facing a world where the Tao is not as present as it once was is that, look, everybody, we need to promote virtues like benevolence, justice, filial piety, loyalty, and so on. That is the conventional thinking, frequent reminders. So why is this in the left-hand column along with the popular ruler right above it? It is also because this is not an approach that lasts. From first-hand experience, we know reminders don't last very long. And that's why they need to be frequent. You get reminded, you follow what the reminder says. After a while, it starts to fade from your mind. Then you need another reminder. Also, as pointed out in previous slides, forced, contrite virtues, they don't come from the heart. They lack authenticity. So think about it. Fake, pretentious virtues can be worse than no virtues at all, because it's just so pretentious. It is so fake. It's not even real. So from the Tao perspective, what would be something that's better? Like the highest level of rulers compared to the popular ruler. Things are better and the way they should be when the people have returned to the Tao, or when the Tao is present and paid attention to in the world. Then all the virtues that we've been talking about, they are simply parts of the common social norm. They come naturally to everyone. Why is this aligned with the Tao? Why is it closer to the Tao? Because it lasts. This can be lasting precisely because it is natural. What we're saying is that being virtuous, like benevolent, kind, just, compassionate, loyal, and so on, being virtuous is simply the way people are. And no reminders are necessary. You don't need to set down rules for people to be good. They're naturally good. Now, we get to 19, the current chapter. When we talk about sagacity and knowledge, the conventional thinking is give us the knowledge we need, provide us with wisdom to solve our problems. Now, from personal experience, I think you have seen this as well. We know people do not value what they can easily get. If they get something for free, they assume it is worthless. This applies to anything, and that includes knowledge. So when a help cultivator helps people using the Tao wisdom that he or she has learned, it may seem like a positive thing, but there are actually some potential negatives. For instance, there's an ego boost when people praise the Tao cultivator for the wisdom. This is something that can compromise one's practice in humility and therefore can become an obstacle in cultivation. Even worse, the Tao cultivator may inadvertently create a dependency where the people come back with more and more problems. They've come to depend on the Tao cultivator, perhaps you, to solve their problems, to give them advice, to provide them with Tao wisdom. This can even include trivial problems that people should be able to solve for themselves. And this can get totally out of hand, taking up more and more of your time until it is overwhelming. You don't even have time to do your own stuff. And even worse, people may not take the recommended actions, the actions that you told them they should take, but they come back and they ask for help for the same problem, but they ask for help in different ways. How about if I do this? How about if I do that? Well, wait a minute, did you do what I told you to do last time? No, but. Even worse, if the Tao cultivator or the Tao sage stops helping when there's always been help available before, people get mad because they started to take the help for granted. They feel entitled to the help. You can now see the connection between 19 to 18 to 17. This is a scenario that also cannot last. You as a Tao cultivator, we all have a finite amount of time. We have a finite amount of resources in this lifetime. One can only do so much for others in the limited time that we have in this world. What if you go away? What if you're gone? So again, same as the other rows of this column on the conventional thinking, this is not lasting. So Lao Tzu says that is the reason why we should put an end to sagacity and knowledge. So take a look at the Tao perspective so we can conclude this particular discussion. The way to do it, the way of the Tao, the better way is to teach people how to discover the answers for themselves. Guide them in developing their own wisdom. Think about what can happen when this is the approach. Think about how when people have to dig for hidden treasures of knowledge, it feels completely different. There is the thrill of discovery because, hey, we have learned something new. This is exciting. The process of discovery, once mastered, is something that people can use to learn other bits of knowledge and wisdom. The process of discovery does not change, even though the wisdom or knowledge may be completely new. Lastly, and most importantly, what the people discover for themselves, they cherish, they treasure. So, in this way, what the Tao would advise is to not give prepackaged wisdom to people, but to guide them on the path of discovery, the discovery of their own solutions. You and I can never predict what additional problems will manifest in life going forward. But whatever those new problems turn out to be in the future, the people who have developed their own ability to find wisdom and knowledge, they have a far better chance of solving whatever will come their way without having to turn to anyone else. Now you can see how this is actually connected to the previous chapters. And I will remark that today, right now, most people, for the most part, are still dwelling in the left-hand column. It would take an effort for most people to shift their mental paradigm from the left to the right. This is what the Tao does. It presents a higher level of clarity and understanding about the nature of the world and the nature of human beings. And now you have learned the way that Lao Tzu looked at the world. I hope that you will adopt his mental paradigm as your own. Lastly, I will remark that what we're talking about here is nothing new in the world of Western wisdom. Everything we're talking about in the left-hand column is like when we say, give the man a fish and feed him for a day. That's the conventional thinking. The right-hand column is the better way. Teach the man how to fish and feed him for a lifetime. So that's what I meant by the self-sufficiency of the Tao. So we've been talking about conventional thinking versus the Tao paradigm. And now you see the connecting thread from 17 to 18 to 19. It results in what we're studying right now. And the lines are, and sagacity, abandon knowledge, the people benefit 100 times. Let us move on to line 3. Line 3 says, and benevolence, abandon righteousness. Now that you have seen how the thought process of Lao Tzu flows from 17 to 18 to 19, it won't be surprising to see that this line continues the thought from line 2 of 道德经 18. In that chapter, line 2 says, there is benevolence and justice. This follows line 1 about the great Tao fades away, as we have discussed previously. So, when there is the rise of benevolence and justice, meaning the constant emphasis and reminders of that, it is only because the Tao has faded away. The forced emphasis and reminders on benevolence and justice, that would not be the Tao. So here, what Lao Tzu is saying is to end this sort of emphasis, to return to the genuine and natural virtues. In the metaphor from Zhuangzi that we discussed last time, the Tao fading away in the world is like a lake that is drying up. In order for us to keep reminding one another to be virtuous, that is just like the fish in the dried up lake giving what little water they have to each other to help each other. Now, there's nothing wrong with mutual assistance, but still, we can see from the metaphor that it would be better for all of us to return to the Tao, just like it would be far better for the lake to be filled with water again. So we can leverage the two lines to understand the rest of this chapter. In this context that we're seeing right here, it becomes obvious that the pretentious virtues, benevolence and righteousness, they emerge when the Tao is forgotten by human beings. This is why, as we look around in our world, we do see that there are those who appear moral and righteous. They point to other people in condemnation. But then, time and time again, we see that they are caught doing the same things that they condemn. So my remark there is that when we study the Tao, it often seems like Lao Tzu is speaking to us directly across the time span of centuries. Next line. Line 4, it says, the people return to piety and kind affection. So this line is also a continuing thought from before. It is from line 6 of 道德经 18. It looks like this. Line 5 in 道德经 18 talks about the 6 relations are not harmonious, meaning the family is lacking in harmony. Then goes to line 6, there is filial piety and kind affection. And that goes into what we're talking about right here, line 4, the people return to piety and kind affection. So keep in mind, when we talk about filial piety, it's the love and respect from the children to the older generation. The kind affection is the other direction, the older generation having kind affection for the younger generation. So here is something that is similar, because we know forced reminders in general are not the Tao. Instead of keep getting reminders, what we need is the authentic expressions of the Tao. What Laozi is suggesting here is that everybody has a natural capacity for real love and respect, piety and kind affection. People are basically good and decent. People naturally want to be kind and compassionate and helpful. So what this is a dichotomy. On the one hand, it's about being good because you're told to be good. On the other hand, what the Tao is at, it's being good because you naturally want to be good and it makes you feel great. Before we leave this line, I want to inject a note here for those of you who have my translation, 道德经 annotated and explained. In the book, there is a misprint where kind affection was changed to charity. So it should be kind affection, as you see here in this slide. I have provided notification to the publisher, but it has not yet been corrected in the book. And for us, that is okay. You can always count on this meeting, online resources like my website to provide the most up-to-date and correct translation for this meeting and your daily use of the Tao Te Ching. So continuing this discussion, and cunning, discard profit, line 5. This is also a continuing line. Specifically, it continues the thought from line 4 of Tao Te Ching 18. And line 3 provides the context. Intelligence comes forth. Line 4, there is great deception, leading to this line from Laozi that we should end cunning, discard profit. Cunning, in this case, means the native manifestation of human intelligence. Intelligence that is used or misused to deceive. And profit here is in the context of excessive greed. Ending cunning and greed address the cause of deception. Cunning is used to increase one's own profits at another person's expense, and this is through theft or robbery. What Laozi is saying here is that the best way, the way of the Tao, is to treat the cause of the disease rather than its symptoms. What he means is that if you talk about catching thieves and robbers, if you talk about law enforcement, that is sort of like pain relief. When you're suffering from illness, you need pain relief. That's not a bad thing, but you also know pain relief medication, that by itself is not doing anything to treat the cause of the illness. It is only relieving you of pain. If the cause is untreated, the symptoms, like pain, will return. It is far more effective to look at the problem in terms of root cause and address that root cause. So when we talked in previous slide about conventional thinking, the usual reaction to criminal activities is to catch and jail criminals. So what Lao Tzu is saying is that imagine what would happen if, or wouldn't it be so much better if there are no criminals that you need to catch and jail? After all, law enforcement activities require effort, sometimes a lot of effort. Therefore, the Tao-centric solution is not to strengthen law enforcement. It is to end cunning, the negative use of intelligence, discard profits, which in this context means unrestrained greed. The idea is to create a situation where people no longer resort to crime. They don't need to. Intelligence can be redirected from deceptive activities, deceptions, scams, to constructive, positive ends that benefit humanity as a whole. And greed, just like desires, can be managed to a level that provides motivation. It'll motivate people toward diligence instead of deception. So that's what a Tao-centric solution would look like. Next line. Line 7. These three things are superficial and insufficient. We'll start out by breaking down the character for these three things. So this is actually easy in terms of translation. 3 characters. The first one, these. It can be this if contextually the noun is singular. In this case, it is plural. The second character there is the number 3. It's easy to recognize because it is just the 3 horizontal lines. And then we have things to wrap it up. What are the 3 things specifically? There's sagacity and knowledge from line 1. Then we have benevolence and righteousness from line 3. Then cunning and profits from line 5. Now, with these quantities, with these aspects of the world, there's always going to be conventional thinking that'll see it as a good thing. But in the Tao context, as Lao Tzu is discussing them, they are not positive at all. Each of the above has an in-depth meaning that is negative in nature. So Lao Tzu is pointing out the Tao perspective that these things lead to the negativity of contrivance and complexity. Let me explain. Lao Tzu says these 3 things are superficial and insufficient, and that is because for sagacity and knowledge, it is actually the contrived appearance of wisdom and knowledge that we're talking about here. It can be negative because you and I can end up being fooled, being deceived by lies and half-truths that sound good superficially. Then the second one, benevolence and righteousness. These are forced actions and behaviors to conform to morality that is being preached. It can be negative, insufficient. How? Because you and I can end up with hypocrites who teach virtues and morality while failing to practice what they preach. So the reminders are not a bad thing in themselves. Emphasis is not a bad thing in itself. But they are not the Tao. They are not the ideal of natural goodness. Then the third factor. This is the cunning and profits. It is the shrewdness that preys on human weakness. The fraud, the scam, all of those deceptive things perpetrated in the world, the vast majority of them prey on human weakness. And not only can these things have negative consequences, they can also make things far more complicated, far more confusing. So I want to present another slide focusing just on these three things in chapter 19 to showcase how the Tao sages will see them versus how people see them, that people may view them in a positive light, while a genuine Tao sage who understands Tao Te Ching 19, this chapter, will see them differently. So again, we have a table view of conventional thinking on the left-hand side, on the left-hand column, the Tao perspective on the right-hand side. We have the three things. So coincidentally, this follows the same structure as the three chapters that flow from one to the other. 17, 18, and 19. Coincidentally, we have the three things, the three aspects of life that we're talking about here, and we'll go through them one by one. Beginning with sagacity and knowledge. So conventional thinking that may see them as a good thing, the pretentious kind of wisdom, the superficial kind of knowledge. Well, most people may say, well, sagacity, wisdom, okay, that's good. Knowledge is power, also good. So people would like to have more of both, more wisdom, more knowledge. Now, in this world, we have many sources of information that claim to present wisdom. We also see people following them being misled because those who provide or present the appearance of wisdom may actually be providing only what people want to hear. These are assurances without substance. They are beautiful, pleasing words that are not true. In fact, at the very end, at the very last chapter of the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu makes a point about this, that these beautiful, pleasing words are not truthful words. For example, there is an idea that one doesn't have to do anything. This is this is baked into the saying, hey, look, you are a human being, okay? Not a human doing. So just be. You don't need to do. Now, when taken in moderation, it can be a good idea to stop frantic activities that lead nowhere. Now, it is also possible that this idea, while pleasing to hear, can become an excuse for passivity, inaction, and stagnation. Whereas the genuine Tao would say, find the right balance between the restful and the dynamic, the action and the downtime. Find the right balance rather than this umbrella statement, you're not a human doing, you don't have to do anything. So another factor about contrived knowledge in terms of book knowledge is that it may become disconnected from reality. That is to say, the ideas that are being presented may be outdated. When the book has been printed, it is a snapshot in time. Therefore, years from the date of its publication, some of the ideas printed may have morphed into something different. And even when the knowledge in books is current, another problem is that many people who read them do not actually use what they have read. This is something that I see all the time. People who have real problems in life, they read books hoping to find a solution, but rather than to apply what they have learned, they just read the next book and the next book and the next book. They can talk about these solutions and techniques of great complexity, but they don't necessarily do what they have learned. Therefore, here's the Tao perspective. The contrived appearance of wisdom and knowledge from books can be harmful to us because of that. Actual wisdom sourced in the Tao is simple. It doesn't need to be complicated. And that actual wisdom has the ring of truth. It'll resonate even when it is not pleasing to hear. And that's why in chapter 81, the very last chapter, Lao Tzu also says, truthful words are not beautiful. It may just be some home truths that you need to hear. Another aspect of it is that when it comes to Tao-centric knowledge, the knowledge of the Tao is practical. It is what we actually apply to life. When we're able to use a bit of knowledge in everyday living, it transforms from knowledge to experience to wisdom. So for these reasons, the conventional versus the Tao, you can see the Tao sages think about sagacity and knowledge in a different way. Let's take a look at the next row down, benevolence and righteousness. Here, the conventional thinking is that people tout moral virtues such as benevolence, justice, filial piety, loyalty, and so on. So this is similar to what we have looked at. We definitely have many sources of teachings that claim to present moral guidelines. And we have seen people who listen to them end up being misguided. And this is because the need for reminders is a sign that we have strayed far from the original state of being naturally good, without any guidelines, without having rules and guardrails imposed on us. So the Tao perspective is that it can be negative because we end up with much morality that seems forced, fake, and may even harbor hypocrisy. And when I talk about fake, of course, this is just a reiteration that when we act from reminders, it is not genuine. It is not like acting straight from one's heart. And those reminders will fade from memory, and they need to be reinforced. In the third row, cunning and profits. Well, people may see being cunning, being shrewd, is a good thing because it demonstrates intelligence. And people like profits because it just means an increase in material wealth. Who doesn't like that? What the Tao sages point out is that these can be quite negative because deception, they come from the misuse of intelligence. The profit motive can easily become greed. We look around in the world, we see people who prey on others. They claim to present opportunities for personal gain. But then their victims, the ones who buy into these schemes, they end up finding themselves poor, badly deceived, defrauded. So this is definitely a negative consequence. We see this manifested in different levels. At the typical everyday level, it can just be fake or false advertising. It can be exaggerations that are misleading. But then definitely at the extreme level, there are definitely scams that seek to trap the unwary. So for all of these reasons, Lao Tzu would say these three things are superficial and insufficient. That is why he needs to provide a prescription for the cure that will help us with the problem of having Tao being neglected in the world. A prescription that will basically point to a path to return to the Tao. Much more to talk about, but as you can see, we're getting close to the top of the hour now. So what we need to do is to jump to the summary slide so we can summarize what we have talked about for today. This is part 1 of 2, summarizing 19. And this is where Lao Tzu is addressing the problems of the world. First, the appearance of wisdom and knowledge. This is contrived false projection of wisdom and knowledge. They arise when the world is in chaos. That is why we need to see through the facade of false wisdom and knowledge. Lao Tzu says people benefit 100 times, that they benefit greatly when they stop buying into the falsehood. Hence, the need to stop, the need to end the falsehoods. Number 2, the emphasis on benevolence and righteousness. And we know that the meaning covers the other virtues that get emphasized as well, like filial piety. So Lao Tzu is basically pointing out that reminders by themselves cannot make people better. They are temporary measures at best. And people are not necessarily acting from their good nature. They're acting from instruction and direction provided in the reminder. Therefore, the better way is to return to the natural goodness of the Tao. Then the reminders no longer become necessary. Then, the third factor, the rise of deceptions and greed. So we have talked about deception is the misuse of intelligence plus greed resulting in crimes. And rather than to treat the symptoms like the painkiller example that we talked about, it is an issue we need to resolve at its source, treating the root cause. So, with just a few lines in part 1, there's a lot to dig into. And there is even more in part 2 when Lao Tzu presents his solution to return to the Tao. So we'll discuss that next time. For now, I want to make sure that I talk about sharing the Tao. The easiest way to access Tao resources is to visit my author website, dereklin.com. There, you can click on links and go to the webpage where you will find everything listed, such as Taoism.net, with information about the Tao and also about this meeting. Our Facebook community, where you can ask questions or discuss your thoughts on the Tao with others. Our YouTube channel, where you can watch recordings of all our previous meetings. My Amazon author page, where you can find books and audiobooks for your continuing exploration. You can also go directly with the web address dereklin.com/links, as you can see. You can use these resources to share the Tao with the people you know who may be interested. When you see the benefits of Tao cultivation in your life, you can share your experience with others through your comments in Facebook or YouTube. If you find my books or audiobooks to be helpful, you can post your reviews on Amazon to help others discover the Tao. This is the path that I am on, so I can say sharing the Tao has benefited me personally in every aspect of life. I would like to invite you to come along with me to share the Tao. Let us travel together on the path in the journey of life. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.